Thank you very much. I spend most of my time writing music. I'm almost a full-time composer, and a couple of days a week I leave the Southern Highlands where I live and come to Sydney, and for those 2 days I'm a radio presenter on Radio National, as Ros mentioned, and we talk about the program's called The Music Show, and it's been going for a very long time. I think we're in our 29th year. I've only been presenting it for 25 of those years. And we talk about all sorts of music. We try to rule nothing out. And one of the things that comes up quite often, because it is a talk program, I mean, our subject is music, but what we do is talk. One of the things which comes up quite often is this notion that music is an international language. It's something that one hears very often when people talk about international relations, for example, how music can bridge cultures because it's an international language. Well, I don't think music is an international language, actually. To be precise, I don't think it's a language, and I don't think it's international. If it were a language, you would be able to say things in it, you know, specific things like, could you pass me the water? And you can't, obviously. You can't say anything specific in music. You ought to be able to translate it. I mean, you know, other languages, you can translate one into another, can't you? You can say the same thing. You might lose, you're probably going to lose some nuances of meaning, but you're going to get the gist of it, but you can't translate, you know, a Brahms intermezzo into Urdu. So it doesn't have some of the things, music doesn't have some of the things that languages are supposed to have. And then, of course, there's the fact that it's not international, and that's so easy to prove because, yes, we try to rule nothing out on the music show. We try to address all sorts of music. I always say the music show has something for everyone to hate. And you know what I mean, because there's nobody here in this room who likes all music equally or understands all music equally. In fact, I'm not sure how possible it is to understand music at all in the sense in which we would understand the meaning of a sentence such as, could you please pass me the water? So it's something else. In her introduction, Ros said that I had a visceral love of all of the music that I present on the radio. It's not actually true. I love some of it more viscerally than others. And there's some sorts of music that I don't really understand terribly well at all, which isn't to say I'm not interested in it. Of course I am. And I'm interested in the people I interview. I always feel you can be interested in anybody for 15 to 20 minutes, which is about the length of the interview. So if it isn't a language, what is it? And why do people call it a language? Well, I suppose they say it's a language because it's a kind of cliche. And the thing about cliches is that generally speaking, there's an element of truth in them. I mean, that's how they became cliches in the first place, because people kept saying the same things over and over again. And whilst it might be verbally lazy or intellectually sloppy, it's nevertheless not a lie exactly. But in the case of music being a language, it's pretty far from the mark. What music is a system, or perhaps I should say a series of systems, because music in one culture doesn't function quite like it does in another culture, but there are things that are in common, of course, and here we are getting to the moment where you begin to wonder whether it could be an international language. I mean, we're talking about pitch. Is it me that, do you think I'm doing that? All right, it's just, does it sound all right? There's an extraordinary kind of rumbling coming out of that speaker. Okay, as long as it's not bothering anybody else. We're talking about pitch, and we're talking about the relationship between pitches. We're talking about intervals. Okay, all music has this. And in some cases, those intervals and those pitches pile up and you get harmony. But actually harmony in music is a surprisingly rare commodity in terms of the musics of the world. Most of the world's musics are not harmonic in the sense that Western music tends to be. And then there's the duration of those pitches, which when you string a few durations together, you get something like rhythm. Even if the music isn't what you would necessarily call rhythmic music, nevertheless, there is a rate of change to the pitches, and that's really what rhythm is. And there's articulation, the way that the notes are played or sung, and there's dynamics, how loudly or quietly the notes are played or sung. And in some cultures, this is at least as important as the notes themselves. Just as most of the world's musics are not harmonic, also most of them are not notated. But in the musics that do have notation, they don't necessarily, the different notation systems don't necessarily notate the same things. So that if you look, for example, at the notation of a Beethoven piano sonata, you're going to find a lot of information about pitch and rhythm, not so much about articulation. There might be an accent on a note, but Beethoven really doesn't tell you what to do. I mean, you play it a bit louder or a bit harder or something. But whereas if you look at some notations of Chinese lute music, for instance, or shakuhachi music, you find an awful lot of information about exactly how to pluck or blow the note. And in some cases, as I say, that's actually more important from a musical point of view, from an expressive point of view, than the note itself. So we're talking about systems that are related to each other, but don't necessarily have a hell of a lot in common. And of course, if you play a certain type of music to a person, there is a very good chance that they won't really get it. They may even say, "You call that music?" It's not an uncommon expression. So what does it all mean? I mean, what we're talking about now is actually what is music? What's it for? And of course, it means different things in different cultures and different circumstances as well. Even in our own lives, it's going to mean something different. If it's a piece of music that you may know very well, you may have known it since childhood, and then you encounter it on a particular day, in a particular set of circumstances, and it changes its meaning on you. You suddenly find that you are moved by this music in a way that you hadn't been before, or maybe the opposite happens. Maybe it does nothing to you at all. A piece of music you'd always thought was rather wonderful, and it just goes for nothing. So our personalities and our ears and simply how we feel on a day-to-day basis affect music. Music is a transactional art form. It's communicative. And here's another cliche coming up. People talk about how music is a great communicator, and you often hear musicians being interviewed, maybe by me, and they say, oh, I think it's so important to communicate with my music, and I bite my tongue at that point, because what I want to say is, and what exactly are you communicating? Because, of course, they can't answer that question, because the real answer is a very, very good answer, but it upsets people. But the answer is that what music communicates is music. And it's enough. Some of the great thinkers of history have thought in music. Bach thought in music. Beethoven and Mozart thought in music. And these are thinkers as great as any other philosophers or writers. But their thoughts are musical thoughts. Hildegard of Bingen thought in music. John Coltrane thought in music. He thought through his saxophone. And the only way we can understand their music is through music. We have to play it, or sing it, or at the very least listen to it. And we know what it means, because when we, for example, play a Bach prelude on the keyboard, we are putting our fingers where Bach put his. Music is patterns in sound, and we can actually put our fingers into those patterns and create them, recreate them. So there is a kind of connection with the mind of Bach, to take one example, or Earl Scruggs for the banjo players here. It's the same thing. You put your fingers on a banjo, play an Earl Scruggs tune, you are doing what he did. You are, in a sense, channeling the thought directly, bypassing reason. You're not asking, what does it mean? What does a Bach prelude mean? It means a Bach prelude. This is what I mean about music communicating music. And of course, this is why it's such an important tool when it comes to international relations. Because you can't dismiss it or sum it up or account for it with words. This is one of the things that drives politicians mad, and this is another good reason for playing music, because they like things that they can count and explain away, and you can't do this with music. The words aren't enough. I realise that I'm speaking as somebody who, for the last 25 years, has made a small living each weekend by trying to talk about music, but I'm under no illusion that I fail every time. Every week, my guests and I fail, and we try and do it as entertainingly as possible, but we don't actually get it right, because you can't put music into words. But how wonderful. The other thing, of course, is that in order to play music or listen to music, you have to stop talking. You have to listen. And in a sense, almost surrender to the music. Certainly, if you're going to get anything out of it, you have to go to the music on its terms and try to fit your mind to the same patterns that Bach or Earl Scruggs imagined. And anything that forces you to be quiet, that forces us to be quiet in today's world, is a very important commodity. And if it can do that to a room full of people or a stadium full of people, all the better, to have people concentrating together and coming to different conclusions, of course. We don't all get the same thing out of a Bach prelude or an Earl Scruggs tune, but we get something, and we get it by fitting our minds to those patterns. I could say some specific things about sort of initiatives, shall we say, that involve music and international relations, but maybe that can wait until I sit down. But thank you for inviting me here. It's not